welcome to another episode of We're Never Truly Alone, your favorite podcast with your favorite mediums, Tiffany Rice. How are you guys today? You are in for a treat. I have yet again my special friend, Jenn Gulbrand. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you again for having me.
I'm so
excited. For having me back, I should say.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you back on because in our first episode, we talked about your business, which is WeBreathe Wellness, that's located in Walpole, Massachusetts, and how transformative opening that space is for you on a personal level, and then also how many people you are transforming, like their lives are being transformed because of your space.
Thank you.
And as we were talking, I was like, wait a minute, we can't end this here.
We ran out of time.
Right. It was like we ran out of time. And there was just so many different areas that I really wanted to discuss with you.
Sure.
So I had mentioned in the previous podcast that you are an author and you have a couple books out. We talked about one of your books and we didn't get to talk about the other. So I wanted to take this moment in this episode to talk about SheBreathes Soul Stories. And it actually has enlightened you to create your own podcast, which is also the Soul Stories podcast.
Yes, correct.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's back up because one thing that we talked about in private before we even aired this podcast is that we have something in common.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And I think we probably have more than one thing in common.
We do. Oh my gosh, are we dating?
We're both Aries.
Oh my gosh. Compatibility is off the charts. Okay. So wait a minute. But when we were talking, our very, very first conversation on the phone is you brought up that you were adopted.
Yes.
And I'm adopted.
I know.
And there's millions of people out there that are adopted.
It's true.
And you have an adopted daughter.
I do.
I have a sister that's adopted. Like, there's just so much that has to do with adoption.
That's true.
So I wanted to focus in a little bit about your start because I want to share my adoption story too.
Oh, wonderful.
And just kind of how your life was from realizing like you just kind of go with the flow and knowing that you're adopted, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you realize, oh, some of the things that I do in my life is a result of me being adopted, and I had no idea that I would put two and two together. So let's talk about it.
Okay, let's do that.
So
who's going first?
I know, right? I mean, well, I guess you could ask me questions too, and I could ask you if you wanted to.
Well, why don't you share your adoption story with us?
Okay. It was during the blizzard of 78. Picture this. The blizzard of 78. Now, I was born March 23rd, Aries, in Dorchester, Massachusetts. And I was a preemie. I was born 2 months early. Again, Aries, I had a lot to do. I had a lot to do.
You had to get out.
Yeah.
And get going.
3 pounds, 15 ounces.
Wow.
I was I was like, I got stuff to go do. I don't have a home, but I'm okay. So I was born early. And since I was born early, I was in an incubator for about a month. And then I went over to Boston Children's Services. And at that point, fast forward to July. So from March until July, I was just kind of hanging out, checking things out, was ready for anybody to hold me, ready for anybody to love me. But pretty much I was just laying around and eating. Right. And in July, I was adopted by this amazing family in the South Shore of Massachusetts. And they had a daughter who was also adopted, and she was 7 years older than me.
Wow.
So I grew up with a sister who is 7 years older than me that is also adopted as well.
That's so cool.
So I went along. I had no idea I was adopted until around 5 years old, and I can remember the day my sister had a friend over, and my sister had said to her friend, because I used to just always annoyingly hang around them because I didn't have any friends at that time, because I was 5. And so my sister said, my sister's adopted too. She was telling her friend, like, I'm adopted, my sister's adopted too. And I'm like, yeah, I'm adopted too. And so like I ran around like yelling that I was adopted. And then I asked my mom what that was. Oh. And so when she said, oh, you have different parents, you might think that I would be upset. Yeah. But I took it as like, wow.
I'm so special.
Yes, I'm so special. And I immediately thought my parents were celebrities, and I thought they were Luke and Laura from
General Hospital.
General Hospital. Yeah. And so, because my mom loved soap operas, and I was like, my parents are Luke and Laura, and if they're not, they're definitely celebrities. One point I thought that they were aliens, which, hey, you never know.
Right.
But, I took it as like when I was younger, I thought I was just so special.
And you are.
Thank you. And so then fast forward, I'm definitely giving you cliff notes.
Yes.
So then let's fast forward. I got a little older. I went through a tough teenage patch of, saying things to my parents that during your teenage years you probably shouldn't say, but being adopted, I can remember saying really hurtful things like, you aren't my parents, you aren't my real parents, Little did I know, my immature brain, they gave me, I'm going to get emotional.
I know. Well, I did last time.
Gave me
So
the best life.
of course they did. Yeah. Because they loved you.
Yeah,
And because they wanted you. And that's what made you special.
exactly.
Yeah.
And fast forward again, I found my biological family.
Mm-hmm.
My parents weren't together. I was a product of a party in the projects.
Right.
And I've met my biological family. They're great. My biological birth parents, they're great. But I'm really happy that I was given the life that I was chosen for, know?
Because your mom and dad are your mom and dad, right? We have biological parents, and then we have our parents. And a lot of people don't understand that if they haven't been adopted. They
Right.
don't understand. Well, no, those aren't your real parents. Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
They are the ones that were there for me from day one on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, so you have this like emotion back and forth of like what's good and what's not. And then, and then you get a little older and you realize like how you end up perceiving certain relationships in your life.
Sure.
And how they kind of manifest. I've realized at a young age, I always felt like I had to hold on to relationships, friendships, not just even partnerships.
Oh, right.
Partnerships is a whole other story that's connected, but even friendships, I would hold on to friendships until like for way too long,
Right.
Even
when they weren't good for you.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Because I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to let it go. And I just wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be valued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we all need?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then in relationships, when I started to date, it was the same thing. It was like, I just remember like my first boyfriend thinking, oh my gosh, someone actually thinks I'm pretty, or someone thinks like they're interested in me. And, and I just would hold on to these relationships that, again, were outdated, so to speak. And I didn't understand why I kept on doing the same thing. Because I was like, well, if I just try a little harder, or if I just do this, and I kept on putting all that responsibility on myself. And then I realized that it was my fear of being abandoned.
Of course. All over again.
And I didn't realize that until I started going to talk therapy.
Right. Right. It's so, unfortunately, so much more common than we would think.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what, for those of us who are adopted, that underlying limiting belief is, we carry it for all of our lives.
Absolutely.
And at some point, hopefully, like you and I, we become aware of it and we start to understand it, and then we can unravel it. But it's stuck in there and really deep, right?
So deep. And you don't realize it.
Right.
You don't realize it until you get yourself in the chair of a therapy office,
Right, right.
or you have that connection,
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
my biological parents did the best thing that they absolutely could do.
Absolutely.
But when you think about, the first 4 months of my life where it's all about bonding with your maternal and paternal family, I was literally laying in an incubator and just
Absolutely.
looking
Alone.
around alone. So trying to have that imprint of bonding
Right.
was never there for me.
Right.
So-
Until you became a part of your family.
Exactly.
Right. But those formative months, those
Yes.
first few months are so critical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. I understand.
Yeah. So,
Thank you for sharing that with
thanks
me.
for making me cry on my own podcast.
Well, this is
Right?
what I'm focusing my life on right now, is
Right?
allowing people to tell their stories and get real with themselves and with one another, because when we do that, we just connect in a more meaningful way. And we better understand ourselves and eventually one another. And that's
Exactly.
really important.
So, taking the heat off myself for a minute.
Yeah.
Why don't you do the talking?
Okay, I'll tell you my story.
I want to hear all about your story.
Well, this takes us back to 1963, a little bit
Okay,
earlier
okay.
in our history. So I was born on a cold March 27th morning.
Ooh.
So we were only 4 days apart, in Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
And my birth mother was a immigrant from Germany. And she had been engaging in a 7-year affair with a Sicilian restaurant owner in Madison, Wisconsin, who, by the way, had his own wife and children, 6 of them at the time.
Wow.
So there's a whole nother book that I'm planning to write about this.
But wait, you're lucky number 7.
Yeah, lucky number 7. So she had a daughter, an older daughter who was 13, who was the daughter of another man that she had known from her past. Mm-hmm. So she was a single mom working around the clock in this restaurant, engaging in this affair. And I truly believe that they loved each other deeply, and I don't blame either one of them, but they hurt a lot. Their actions hurt a lot of people, right? It hurt both of their families deeply. My birth mother, for whatever reason, chose to wear the scarlet letter and carry this married man's child where everyone knew that what was going on, and chose to carry me instead of eliminate her pregnancy, which I respect and appreciate. Mm-hmm. And it was hard for her. But when I was born that morning, she had really just went into hysterics, mm-hmm. from what I'm told, and was screaming to have me removed from the room. So my first breaths that I took on March 27th of 1963, I was alone and afraid and abandoned. Right? So then I went into the system, and I think my parents adopted me probably somewhere between 6 weeks to 6 to 12 weeks. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah. But I was, taken into the system, and from what I understand, I went to several different homes, foster homes. And then my beautiful parents and my 3 older brothers adopted me, and I had a really beautiful, blessed life in the Midwest, being raised by these 2 teachers and their sons, and I too could go on and on about all of that and how grateful I am. The thing that we need to learn is that even though we were little new souls in these new little bodies, those moments, those first moments, were defining moments for us, because our souls took those messages or those experiences and created a limiting belief system. So you and I both came into this world ready to go as Aries, ready for that warm embrace that never came, ready for somebody to gaze down at them and in like so much love and connection of this human they just created. And we didn't get that, right?
Right.
So we're left there going, wait a minute, this isn't what I had signed up for.
Right.
So we decided in our subconscious minds that we were not worthy of that love, and that's why we were left behind. And we didn't understand that growing up, right? You didn't know that. I didn't know that. No. We just were doing what we were doing in our human bodies. But at some point, you start to understand how you showed up in the world because of those limiting beliefs. So for myself, I know that I, at some point, kind of shape-shifted and decided that I was going to just show up so boldly in my little 5'3" body. Like
right.
we're also similar in stature.
Yes.
And like just bulldoze my way and make sure that people saw me and heard me and validated me. And I was going to be the best at everything. And I went, leads in all the musicals, cheerleader. That was really awful. I hated it. I chose musical theater instead. But like
I went to school for theater art.
Right.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So like putting ourselves out front and center so we would be seen because we didn't feel seen. We didn't feel valued. And it became this kind of false race in time to be like, right? To get what we didn't get when we were babies. And it didn't always feel in alignment for me. I got to tell you. I mean, I write about this in my first book about how I was so like just not really listening to my true nature all those years later. And it did impact my relationships. It impacted how I showed up in just about every part of my life. And the relationships I chose, the men I chose. I decided I needed to choose people who were wounded, and so I could help them and save them, rescue them.
I can relate to that.
Which we're not here to be rescued by other people, right? So this kind of spiral that goes on. And but the beautiful thing is, at some point we start to understand it. You know, whether it's going to talk therapy or, you know, being in this profession that we're in, and we start to understand it, and then we give ourselves a little break, right? And be like, you know what? Okay, now I better understand why I showed up in the way that I did. And I'm going to love myself, and I'm going to, you know, all that stuff that I missed, I'm going to rewrite my story, and I'm going to share it. And that's really what led me to writing my first book and trying to resonate with other people so that they would feel less alone and less broken, because none of us are alone and broken. It's just a perception in our mind.
You know, my trademark is we are never truly alone.
Well, I just realized that as I said those words. Yes.
So how, I mean, there's always purpose into
Absolutely.
why I created that.
Yeah. It's we aren't. And the world is so isolating now, and people really need to feel connected. And so what I ended up doing with this second book is to say, I want to try to encourage everyone else to be more authentic and to share their stories of pain and trauma and how it impacted them, and not how it broke them or held them stuck, how they learned from those experiences. And when you share your truths, like look what just happened when we shared our stories with each other. What happened? We felt empathy for one another. We felt this compassion, right, for one another. We connect in different ways when we are real. And when we break down those stereotypes and we look and learn and listen to one another. And that's what the Soul Stories movement is all about. That's what the second book is about. I encourage 22 women just like us to share their stories of tragedy and triumph and transformation. And then now I'm like, just this is a movement. I have goosebumps thinking about it, because I know that if we could get people to be more compassionate in that way and to listen and learn from one another, that we'd make the world a better place, one interaction at a time.
And it's not always so easy.
It's not
It's
easy.
not easy. Life is not easy. And that's what I tell people. I mean, what you see on social media is a whole other story.
Right.
You know, and it's when you can peel back those layers, it just helps so much. So,
but we hide, right? We try to, we hide, I don't think on purpose, but we hide because we think it's safer.
Right.
If we hide and we don't tell all of our icky stuff, then people will accept us and we'll belong and we will feel a part of something.
Right.
But in reality, we're never feeling real, or we're not embodying who we really are. So it never feels
You're
good.
just such an amazing soul.
Oh,
You really
as are you.
So, tell me more, because I know you mentioned that your daughter's adopted as well. So what's your story behind that?
Oh my gosh, my beautiful girl. So, well, speaking of life's tragedies, so when I got married later in life. I was 30, my husband was 43. And when I finally convinced him that we should become parents, because he came to the table with all kinds of trauma, childhood trauma from a home where he was really abused by his father. So he wasn't going to be a dad at all, right? This is another thing. We come together in relationships. We're all carrying wounds,
Right.
and most of which are unresolved. And then we try to come together and have a healthy relationship. That's a whole nother podcast.
Well, exactly. Well, I talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
It's like allowing yourself to be accountable.
Yes.
And it's really hard, because when you do the work on yourself, like I've been doing the work effectively for over 10 years now. And so now when I have certain people come into my life, there's certain ones that come in and out really quick. And it's almost because they have to really be on that same vibration.
Absolutely.
And if they aren't,
they're not ready.
They're not ready.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not the right fit.
Right.
So anyway, I digressed. But the point is,
it's okay.
so
I
we
do
were
too.
wanting to become. I decided we were going to become parents. He just went along for the ride because remember he's a Virgo. So we got pregnant super easily each and every time. But unfortunately, every time I would get between 12 and 4 weeks in my pregnancy, I would miscarry. So I had 4 miscarriages, and they were all girls. I know this. And but we didn't give up. And then we got pregnant with twin boys, Enzo and Max. And we carried them for 5 months. And I had, I got to experience everything that goes along with carrying a baby, but I got 2 at once. It was during 9/11. And I remember pulling myself away from the news because I was just trying to keep myself and my babies in a healthy space. But one night I went into premature labor. And we went off to Newton Wellesley Hospital, and only to find out that I was too far along in the labor to stop it, and that my boys' lungs were not formed enough to live outside my body. And I had to go through 18 hours of labor, birthing them. It was the most traumatic time I've ever experienced. And I can tell you that I actually went out of my body. I remember being up over my body, looking down at the nurses with tears streaming down their faces, and my husband's head bowed over my, on my other side, and I had a choice to make. I was either going or staying because I was in shock, right? And I stayed, and I sent my little baby souls off to a better place, but it was really life-shattering. Life-shattering.
You're making me cry again.
I know. I'm really good at that. But, it was a really hard time. And I just wanted to be a parent. And I didn't really care how I did that. And so that was in November. And in February, in November, after that loss, I convinced my husband to go to the adoption agency. We were going to adopt internationally or domestically interracial because I did not care what color my baby was. Right. And a lot of people wanted white babies. I didn't care. And we didn't care. And then, so we signed up for the Guatemala program and the interracial program in the U.S. And then we got a call from the adoption agency saying, we know you're in the Guatemala program, but we have a group of babies in Russia who need to be moved through the system quickly. We need parents who can move fast through they put you through this very rigorous process. And we weren't even done yet, but we were like, sign us up.
Right.
So this was February 8th. And they said, you need to be ready to go in April. So we
you're ready.
Did it.
Oh my gosh, I have chills already. Yes.
So, and trust me, redid the nursery for a 5th time, right? You can imagine that process. So here we are, ready to go, and the system closes down. So Russia, there's just a lot of history of adoptions and families, and they would open the system, close the system to Americans. It was very difficult. Long story short, we finally got on a plane in June, and we went over to Russia, and we were able to meet our daughter and go to court, and then most families would come home and wait, but I was not leaving my daughter. So we stayed in Moscow for 28 days.
Wow.
And we went and visited her every day.
And how old was she at this point?
She was 15 months, and she was, are you ready? 15 pounds. They were so undernourished, these poor babies.
Gosh.
And I wanted to take all of them out of there. I mean, because it was so sad. And but we bonded with her there. We would take her outside and sing her Beatles songs, and that is her favorite band today. She's 23. She knows every Beatles song,
Oh, I love
all the
that.
lyrics. But we had a beautiful 28 days. We were able to take her out of this finally on, we call it Got Each Other Day. We took her out on day 17, and we stayed in a hotel doing all the processing and the paperwork. And we brought her home, and the rest is history. And she was meant to be our daughter. Wow. And she is, her birthday is March 22nd.
Oh,
so
Aries.
Right? So
yes.
Right? These poor men surrounded by all these Aries women. But yeah, so she's 23 and almost 23, turning 23 in March. And just the biggest blessing that I could ever have asked for. And I am so proud of her every day.
That's amazing. And do you see her like has she talked about like her birth parents? Like, do you know anything about their birth?
Oh, yeah. I
like,
never even told you about my birth parents.
Well,
so
yeah,
much.
I mean, like you and I know a little bit about
yeah.
each other's birth
Sure.
parents now, but it's so different now.
When it's over,
especially,
absolutely.
It's so different.
And I forgot to mention, I did meet my birth mother and my half sister and my birth father's family, but he was already had left this earth by the time I found them. But I found out that he was in the hospital across from the restaurant that I bartended in for like the entire time I was in college. He was there, and I bartended with cousins and didn't even know it, that they were cousins. So wild.
I used to give my hand-me-down clothes to my mother's friend at work, who ended up being my biological aunt.
Oh, see?
So
it's
like I was giving my clothes to my biological cousins, and I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. This is how the universe works. It's so fun.
Absolutely.
It really is
it's
fun.
It's really crazy. And I am, for the record, I am glad that I know who my birth parents are. My mom was 15 when she got pregnant. My dad was 18.
Yeah.
They just weren't ready to be parents.
Of course.
You know, it was a different lifestyle.
It was.
So I have at the end of the day, I have no animosity.
No.
It was just going through my teen years with me not understanding why was I giving up, what happened. But now I've realized that I have such an amazing life because they were so selfless and able to do that.
It's so true. It's such a selfless act. It really is. It's like when you're growing up, you have this empty closet. Everyone has a closet with all their information. You know, these are your genetics and this is your health history. And we just had this empty closet.
It didn't look like anybody.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I know. It's so crazy. But so back to my daughter. Sorry, I go all over the place.
No, I did too. Because I was like, wait, did we wrap up that?
I know. I can't help. No, and I don't even have it, but I'm doing it. I'm acting like Elf on, all the shiny things. So with Natalia, her birth mother was 19 and birth father was, they had a relationship, but it wasn't a positive one. But so when she was 5, I started trying to find all the information for her because I wanted her to have access to information that I didn't. It took me till I was in my, late 40s to find my birth mother in my family. But so I wanted to gather information for her. It took me a couple of years and quite a bit of dollars, but I finally tracked down her birth mother through her, actually in her grandmother, her birth mother's mother. And then we got a lot more information for her and we gathered it all up. And we even reached out through an interpreter who kept it all anonymous because it wasn't my decision to make.
Right.
And so we were able to send them pictures and letters and make them feel so much better about their choices that they made. But Natalia, when she was 11, I gave her everything I had, all the information that I had gathered, the letters that we had written, and told her that at any time, if she wanted to pursue a reunion, that I would help her with that. And up until now, she hasn't had that desire, but I'm always there ready to help her if she is, because it's her history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny because my sister, who's also adopted, she has no desire.
Yeah.
Ever since I was younger, I always had the desire to know, but she has had no desire whatsoever. Yeah. And they say that too, when you have multiple children that are adopted, you will get some that are like so into finding, and because I just wanted to know like who I looked like and the personality and so forth. I had all these unanswered questions.
Mm-hmm. It's so true.
You know, I did find them when it was right before I turned 23.
Oh, you were younger.
Yes.
Good.
I found really quick, I got a birthday card in the mail. And it said, hi, my name is Donna, and I got your name off the Massachusetts Adoption Registry that you put your name in 1997. And I had a baby girl born March 23rd at Dorchester Hospital. And she said, I don't know if this is you or not, but I figured I would try. Here's my email address. And I remember going into work the next day, not being able to sleep at night, going into work the next day thinking oh my gosh, what do I do? So I emailed her, and the limited information that I had, which was my parents were 5'8" and 5'4", blue eyes and brown hair and so forth. Yeah. So she gave me the information, and she's like, well, what should we do? And of course, the Aries in me, well, let's meet today.
Yeah. So
I go into my boss's office and I said, hey, and I show him the card, and he goes, Ocean Ave. He goes, that's the street I grew up on.
Oh my God.
He grew up with my biological parents.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So
see how it is?
Yes. So he's like, go. So I go, and I meet him at there's a mall out here, guys, called South Shore. What is it?
South Shore Plaza?
South Shore Plaza, yeah. So I meet her at the Sears parking garage, like outside, and I'm walking around, and all of a sudden I hear her say, "Hey." And I look over and I'm like, "Hey." And I look at her and she's looking at me. We're both just checking each other out. And I'm like, not sure. She brought all these pictures. So we're looking at pictures. We go to lunch. Again, long story short, we don't look too much alike, so we're not quite sure. And then she's like, "I have to go pick up my daughter from school." And I said, "Oh, okay." She goes, "Well, do you want to come with me?" No, at any given point, I could have been kidnapped. But hey,
right.
seize the day.
Right.
So I hop in her car and I
Love
go in and I end up finding, she brings me to her sister's house and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's David's daughter. That's David's daughter." And I'm like, "Who's David? Like, where is this guy?" And so they bring me to the neighborhood of where David's family lives. And we show up at the door. And they knock on the door and they said, "Hi, we have reason to believe this is David's daughter." And the person that answers the door looks at me, starts crying.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh my gosh, this is David's daughter." So we go into the house and I look at the pictures of like all these kids and they all resemble me.
Yeah.
And
isn't that a bizarre feeling?
it
But
was
also
such a bizarre feeling.
Yeah.
And so the house that we showed up at happened to be my biological dad's sister's house. And so she's like, "Nope, she looks just like David." And long story short, the next day I went back and I met my biological dad.
Good
and
for you.
And him, and like there's no denying that I'm his daughter. And so it's
so
really
crazy.
funny. But like telling that story to someone who's known their parents all their life,
They
they're
don't get
just
it.
like, "Oh, yeah, that's interesting." But for me, it was so profound.
It's like coming home.
Yes, because in my mind, I'm like, I finally know where I get my eyes from or where I get my nose from. And it's just such an interesting area of life that if you're not adopted, you won't know. You won't know what it's like.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you felt that way too when it was, when you saw pictures or when,
Yeah. Well, plus I was this complete opposite of my entire family that raised me. I love them all so much if they're listening. But I'm like, I'm just out there and I take risks and I make stuff happen. They're very introverted, quiet, very cerebral, very reserved. Talk about black sheep.
Oh, I get it.
I love them all so much. But yeah, I was a lot for their family.
Me too. Exactly. I was like, and I was the baby of
Me too.
even extended cousins and so forth. So I was always the one that needed the extra time and attention. Still do, but
it's okay.
Yeah. But I find like it's so, for people that want to adopt, like your selfless heart is so like genuine and like I'm definitely pro adoption for people that are looking to adopt. One of my best friends has an adopted son and and she questioned me. She's like, "I just want to make sure," she was there at the time of his birth, and she said, "I just want to make sure that like he's going to be bonding to me and that because she's known what I've gone through. So she just wanted to make sure she dotted her I's and crossed her T's. And, there is a lot to, take into consideration.
There is. And the love, it's just all about the love, it's all about the love. And I think in some ways, I always talk to my daughter about this. When you're adopted, you were really wanted by somebody. You were really wanted. It does make you special.
Right.
It does.
Right.
So,
and
thank you for sharing your story with me.
Gosh, thank you. And, and I feel like we need to have a third episode because now this is all about like.
Let's do it.
Because we talked before and I'm like, I want to talk about the adoption and then limited beliefs and so forth. And we're like, all right. And now it's just like the adoption story.
Yeah, but it results in limiting beliefs, which hold us back until we figure it out. And then then we're like, hey.
And there's nothing wrong if you're adopted. So if anybody who is adopted, yes.
No, it's such
and
a
you're
gift.
just thinking like, maybe if they're listening, they can relate to the feeling of that rejection / abandonment
and fear
fear
of being abandoned over and over again in your relationships.
Exactly. Always needing
real.
to be included.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was because I was a needy person. I'd never in a million years until I went to therapy put two and two together of that. Oh, it's because of abandonment. Even here's another one. My dad that raised me, he used to travel all the time. And so I can remember when I was younger thinking he would choose work over me, not understanding like, well, Tiff, do you like a bed at night? Do you like a house over, a house? Like, he's working so you can have a life that's safe. But as a 5-year-old, you're just thinking, oh, he would rather do this than that. That was how my 5-year-old brain worked.
Yeah.
And so, I always chose people that weren't available because that was my uncomfortable but yet comfortable zone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I made comfort in that uncomfortable feeling.
Right. Wow.
Because I thought that was normal.
Our brains are so amazing, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
So now on episode 56 with Jenn.
I know, we could talk all day.
Right? There's
every
so
day.
much. Exactly. I know. We just need to hang out and have the mics hooked up to
That's
us at all
right.
times, right?
Let's talk about this topic.
Right. Exactly.
Well, it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And, I would love to have you back on to discuss more on limited beliefs and so forth.
Yeah.
But, is there anything with everything that you've gone through with, what we just spoke about with the adoption and then you going through such tragedy and still opening your heart to adopt your daughter, like, is there anything that you could give to anybody else that's maybe looking to adopt?
Oh, gosh, so much. First of all, release any shame that you have about not being able to create a human on your own, if that's the case. And or just whatever blocks that that have kept you from being able to have your own. I'm putting that in parentheses. Have a biological child. It's just only part of it. I mean, the real part of parenting is loving a human being and nurturing them and nourishing them and that's what it's all. It just don't get tripped up on. I hear so many people who say, well, I want to have a baby, but my partner doesn't want to adopt because it's not the same. Well, it isn't the same, but in some ways it's better. So just open yourself up to the possibilities. There's so many children out there who need parents, who need homes, and you could be the person or the persons who are providing that to them. And what a gift for all of you. And you'll never love more than, right?
Right.
You feel so loved because you were chosen. And
Exactly.
I hope that's how my daughter feels. And that's certainly how I felt. And it's just a beautiful way of becoming a family.
Right.
So,
and family does not mean that you have to be blood related.
no, it really doesn't.
And even for me, that bridge of having children or adopting has, was never there for me. So I choose to do a lot with rescuing animals and help that way.
It's never too late, my friend.
It's never too late. It is. It's never too late. Never too late. Look at Janet Jackson.
I know, right? Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so much.
coming on again.
Oh, it was
I really
it was my
appreciate
pleasure and my honor. Thank you.
Thanks for making me cry on my own podcast.
Well, that's what we do when we share our truths.
I love that. All right.
All
Thank you guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank
and again,
you.
Jen, where can people find you?
Well, I'm pretty much every day at the WeBreathe Wellness Center in Walpole, Mass. You can check us out on Instagram, on Facebook, or if you want to learn more about my own individual pursuits, Jenn Gulbrand, Embody Your Essence, or I am Jenn Gulbrand on Instagram.
And please go check out her book, SheBreathes Soul Stories.
Thank you so much. Oh, and our podcast, too.
Oh, and the podcast.
Yes.
Yes, the podcast is Soul Stories Podcast.
Yes. And
So-
it's so great because we're just having people come on and tell their stories, which is what this is all about.
Great. Oh, good. I'll just send you this episode and you can use it as your...
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
tuning in. And until next time.